a boxing betting expert.
I know, David.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
He really gets into the nitty-gritty of this whole thing.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for joining me. I'm very excited about this one. I've been following you. I think it goes back about 10 years since the first, or maybe the second Froch Groves fight. So I've certainly Wembley Arena, 80,000. I think you have a unique approach to how you assess fights. So I'm very excited to get into this one. And like I said a minute ago, you've always been an account that before the big fights, I will actively go and look to see what your picks are. So looking forward to getting it. So first things first, Rich, what's your first boxing memory? How did you get into the sport?
Oh, first boxing memory. I think for a lot of people my age, that would have been mid-90s, Tyson, late nights with my dad. Yeah. You know, those 3 a.m., 4 a.m. Vegas, sometimes it was 5 a.m., wasn't it? Yeah. Do
you remember a specific fight?
Oh, God. He had that tour, his return from government mandated vacation, wasn't it? What was I can't remember his first fight when he came out. His third fight was Bruno, wasn't it? I remember that quite vividly because my dad had a number of friends around.
So Peter McNeely straight out of...
Oh, yeah, that was the first one. That's right, yeah. God, I must have been... What was that, 95?
95 it was, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd have only been 7 or 8.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
So you're up in the middle of the night with your dad watching that?
Yeah, that's my first memories, yeah.
So that's very interesting.
What I can remember most vividly, because it was my first insight into the big Vegas arena fights, was how claustrophobic it looked.
Oh, wow.
All those people packed into that really tight arena with a small ring in the center. Yeah, cats in it and stuff.
That's interesting. I think that's sometimes when you go back to those fights from sort of 20 years ago, you get that sense of claustrophobia again. I think it's become more sort of, more showbiz. It seems a bit more spacious. The ring entrants aren't so cluttered. You look at these Tyson entrances, and he's surrounded by people and
large entourages.
Yeah, exactly. And
so many people in the ring.
Yeah, and fans within touching distance, which would now use a lot more sort of space, I think. So it was your dad who got you into the sport, was it? Was he
He's a casual fan. Casual fan. Yeah. Big Tyson fan. Prior to that, when he was younger, Ali towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
Nigel Benn.
Yeah.
So I watched some Ben fights too later. Naz, and then I remember Naz. Dad was not a fan of Naz.
Yeah.
But,
and traditionalist. And so what about how do you feel about the argument that you often see on social media of that first of all, have you boxed before?
Only hit the bag and pads and speedball. That's it.
Yeah. Okay. So what do you feel about the argument when people say that you get quite a sort of strong opinion from certain quarters who say that if you haven't boxed at any level, you can't judge boxing?
You hear this quite a lot on Twitter, don't you?
Yeah.
I don't really give it much heed, to be honest. Yeah. I think that look at the great trainers through the years. Angelo Dundee, what was Duran's, Ray Arcel. Even recently, Abel Sanchez, Virgil Hunter, none of those guys were professional boxers. I think maybe Ray Arcel boxed a little bit amateur, but none of them were professional boxers. And when you're assessing a fighter or their performance or something along those lines, I'm not assessing them against myself. I'm assessing them against other fighters. It would be silly to assess them against myself. What a low standard they have to hold there. I think often it's just to censor people, isn't it?
It is, and
censor argument.
It is, and it tends to come from ex-fighters who have just got called a fight wrong, and they want to explain why they came up with it. So
exactly.
What do you do differently when assessing fights? If you obviously don't give away any secrets, but is there anything that you can sort of share with us about how you do things differently?
Well, I'd say data. How many people in boxing use data? Mainly because they think that the data's not there, right?
Yeah.
Boxing is one of those sports where there is a dearth of available data, and even that's there is not particularly well archived.
Yeah.
But if you do your own research, it's arduous. You can come up with some important predictive variables, I think. So that's really the main thing I think I do different. I don't think I've seen anyone on Twitter that uses like a modeling system like I do, but maybe they do and they don't say. How about yourself?
I would agree. I think you're unique in that, and part of my appeal to the boxing's appeal to me is that lack of data thing. Like,
Right.
if the fact that if one fighter has a very high KO rate, but that doesn't matter if it, that the styles makes fights things, it sort of supersedes the data for me. I said, so can you give any?
It becomes highly subjective then, doesn't it? And
Yeah,
you start to play armchair psychologist.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
that is so when people call me a casual online, I'm absolutely fine with that, because a lot of my picks are based on armchair psychology. I love the sort of the paddock watching, the looking for signs of vulnerability. He's speaking differently to how he spoke last time. You know, all these little things that just a slight.
I've seen you doing it with Fury.
Oh, massively.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not afraid to sort of put those opinions out, because I've been doing it for so long, and more often than not, there's something in there. But do you have any sort of examples of some of the data that you can share with us?
Well, the first thing I'd say, obvious data, is judges' scorecards. Back about 26 up until 2016, I had access through a connection to a large database of scorecards, and I input a lot of that. But the person who I was working with then left the boxing business, went on to politics. So I think I've had to adjust my model a little bit for that, because whilst the big fights have scorecards you can often get, the lesser known fights, it's much harder to access scorecards. So I was dealing with quite a lot of athletic boards in the US,
right?
And I dealt with British boxing boards. So the athletic boards in the US were quite helpful, and they would, if you had a list of cards you wanted, they'd get back to you. It'd take a while, but they would get back to you.
Incredible.
The worst athletic board I dealt with was the British boxing board.
Really?
They were abrasive, rude, secretive. They wouldn't give me anything other than the top British boxing, British title fights. I couldn't get anything else.
And were you explaining what you wanted them for?
Well, at that point, I wasn't using them so much for betting. That was really a side angle. But I was using it. I was trying to build a statistical database for boxing.
Yeah.
But it's just so arduous, so difficult. Yeah. In the end, you give up.
I know in my research, when I try and find scorecards, just even a few years ago, it's very hard to find the actual score. Or you might just find a tweet of a photograph of the scores, and you can barely read the handwriting. To actually get reliable score, I can imagine those problems.
The PPC, every PPC fight, I don't know if you know this, every PPC fight, their scorecards are on the website.
Is that right?
Yes, to this day, that's archived on their website.
And that must go back, what, 10 years then?
I think 2016, was it, PPC?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. So does that... Right. Yeah. I don't want to pry too much into your model, but it's fascinating. Okay. So who over the years, who's been your favorite boxer to watch?
Oh, my favorite boxer would be Roy Jones.
Yeah. Good shout.
That would definitely be Roy Jones.
Good shout.
Just that mix, that rare mix of speed and dynamite power.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Now with Roy Jones, whenever I agree, he's absolutely one of my favorites. But whenever I hear his name, I also think of the argument of longevity ruining legacy, which I don't agree with. But do you have any sort of thoughts on? Mike Tyson's another one. If Mike Tyson quit after the Spinks fight, who knows what that would have done to his legacy? If Roy Jones had quit after fighting John Ruiz for the heavyweight title, yeah. Do you have anything in that sort of legacy area?
I would say that I think the Tarver fight's damaging. Obviously, he won the first one controversially.
Yeah. The
second fight, damaging. They lost to Glenn Johnson, probably still damaging. But I think you need to look at it in context of where they were at that point. Yeah. So Roy Jones, when he fought Tarver the first time, was still considered the pound for pound best fighter in the world. He's still the same when he fought the second fight.
Yeah.
But at that point, once he lost the second fight and came into fighting Glenn Johnson,
Yeah.
he was no longer that same guy. You know, he was still top 3 light heavyweight, and then it was just down from there. So when you get to the point of when he's fighting Calzaghe,
Yeah.
you know, Calzaghe's a Hall of Famer himself.
Yeah.
So is it really that damaging? I don't think so at that point.
And I think that's a great example. I think Calzaghe, I love Joe Calzaghe. He's also he's a Marmite fighter. People, you know, he divides opinions, but I think he's a fantastic boxer.
Yeah.
But his wins over Hopkins and Jones, I don't even consider in his career, really, because
I rate the Hopkins win quite highly.
do you?
Yeah, I do. Hopkins was a lineal light heavyweight champion at the time.
I just feel if they had been made 5 or 10 years earlier, they're different fights.
What do you mean that Hopkins has a better chance of winning?
I think so. Yeah.
I don't know. Look what Hopkins went on to do. He went on to beat Jean Pascal.
Yeah.
What else? He unified. Didn't he unified titles after that? I think. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of people think he did enough to beat Calzaghe anyway.
Yeah, that was controversial himself.
And what about, have you been to many live fights?
I went to 2 Calzaghe fights, actually.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I went to Lacey.
Oh, wow.
And Manfredi, because that's only 40 minutes away from where I am. So, yeah.
That Lacey was a crazy atmosphere.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I backed Lacey that night, too.
So did I.
That's a bad one.
I was, oh, sorry, you backed Lacey.
I backed Lacey, yeah.
Oh, that was one of them. Yeah. I was an odds maker back then. This is a bit of a brag. And I was the only odds maker online to make Calzaghe favorite for that fight.
Is that right?
We went strong on Calzaghe then. And
wow.
Back then it was, I don't think even we had YouTube. It was like DVDs. We would ship in DVDs and what. And it was Sid Vanderpool had fought Lacey, and that was the only southpaw on Lacey's record, and he was in all sorts of bother. And I watched 1 minute of the opening round, and I text my team and say, we've got to make Calzaghe favourite here. And so now, because of that, the South.
What were the lines then, on average?
So I think.
So we're talking either side of evens, are we? It
was pretty close. So I think generally Calzaghe was like 6-4 again. So it was a slight outsider.
Right. Yeah.
We made it. I think we made him just slightly favoured just to get some money on it. So is that the best fight you've seen live?
I would say so. I've seen a number of because just down the road from me, Lee Haskins. I don't know if you remember Lee Haskins.
Yeah,
Bristol fighter. I've seen him a couple of times.
Okay.
I'd say the atmosphere for Lacey Calzaghe. I don't think I've been to one that was replicated. I went to Hey Ruiz.
Right.
And I went to Hey Harrison.
Very different fights. Yeah.
Yeah, and Mitchell Katsidis at Upton Park.
Oh, that's a great fight.
Yeah.
I think that's it. Great ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any overseas?
No. I missed out on. It was my father-in-law's stag party, and they were in Vegas. He's not a boxing fan, but he went to Pacquiao Marquez 3.
Oh wow! Wow.
Yeah, and that was a great fight.
Yeah, nice. You're lucky to get
4. Sorry, 4. 3 was not such a great fight. It was 4. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I can't remember the sequence. Right. Brilliant. Okay. So, is there any sort of fantasy matchups you'd like to see, like either going back in time or even like right now?
Right. Well, I want to fight that I think everybody should be calling for right now is Canelo Benavidez.
Yeah.
I think it's a travesty that that's not happening.
Yeah.
Historically,
it'd be very interesting to see how the betting would go in that as well.
I'd be Canelo. Canelo would be definitely betting favourite, but Benavidez is a big, strong guy.
Yeah.
Is he 6'3", I think?
Is he?
Weighs in 185, 190 fight night.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'd like? Actually, Floyd Mayweather is probably one of the best fighters of the last 30 years. Obviously, how would he have coped with Hearns? He never fought somebody with that power and that height and reach.
Yeah.
probably why he didn't. We never fought Margarito, and Margarito had similar dimensions,
Yeah.
shorter, but long arms.
Corral is similar physically.
Shorter, much smaller. I mean, Hearns went up to cruiserweight, didn't he, late in his career? So,
I mean, it's Clash of Stars goes. That's up there. Yeah.
I've wrote for Bleacher Report about 10, 14 years ago, I think it was. And that was one thing they asked me to write, but it was Pacquiao against the greats in the welterweight division.
Yeah.
And Pacquiao Hearns, I mean,
Yeah.
such a size differential there.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what is do you have a favorite weight division then? Would welterweight be your favorite weight division, or do you have a
Historically, probably, yeah, I'd say it would be welterweight. Right now, 54 is pretty good right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Bud, Fandora, Madrimov, Murtazaliev, and then you've got Tim Tszyu is still there, and Lubin, underrated fighter.
right?
Yeah, 54 is pretty loaded.
Great.
47's in a bit of transition, isn't it, really, now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think there's quite as many sort of household names at welterweight now as there were.
Yeah, they're trying to push Ennis, but
and so if you could change one rule in boxing, what would it be?
Oh, that would one rule. I think everybody would say, I guess it's not a rule, to get rid of all the sanctioning bodies and just have one sanctioning body, obviously. Do you know one thing that I really hate is those high trunks? You know, these guys walking around like they're Patrick Moore.
Yeah.
You know, trunks around their armpits. Fury's the worst for it, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think that needs to be policed.
Yeah, it's so true. There's no official rule for it. Like the referee decides it 3 seconds.
Yeah. It's his discretion. That's right.
Yeah, agree. And it's also like it's absurd in terms of the rules, but like aesthetically, it's really unsatisfying as well. Like you said, it doesn't look good.
Fury, yeah, he's the absolute worst for it.
Yeah,
because he's got those bandy legs, hasn't he?
Yeah,
coming out.
Elevates them even more. So, I reckon you've had some good ones here. I'm trying to remember one of your absolutely fantastic hot takes a few years ago, and I think you put up with real confidence a 10-1 upset, and you might remember it. But if you don't, I know you did do that. You've done it several times. You were on fire for a while, and
not so much anymore. That fire's been put out the last year. Yeah,
it was. So, what is your standout sort of best hot take where you've gone? Either it was an odds-on shot, but you were certain it was going to win, or it was an odds-against shot, and you found the value.
Hot take. I'm trying to think of something. I say quite a lot of things, I guess, which get a lot of traction and controversial. Less so with betting. I can't think of one. I mean, it was an absolute killing, wasn't it? The night that Mayweather fought McGregor.
Oh yeah, sure.
Speaking to the lay people about that was mind-numbing. Sure. That to me was so obvious. I'm sure. I mean, you saw the same thing with Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I bet on the quiet, but I'm not going to push that because I don't want to publicize what I think are fights that shouldn't occur. So I'm not going to put on there a pick. But you called that perfectly anyway.
Yeah.
Joshua and Ngannou. Joshua was, I think, close to 6-4 for the knockout in that fight.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe it was plus 130. Maybe it was 13-10. Oh, I lumped on that heavy.
Did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember he was 3s on overall. He should have been 10s on.
Yeah.
So
I think I put that out somewhere. I was trying to think that 10-1 that you're talking about. Oh, if I had my records up, I could tell you.
It would have been one of your welterweights. It was a welterweight. It might even have been. I'm just like deja vuing. I think it was in Japan.
Is that right? Yeah.
But it was well known, and like you picked him. You picked this guy before he became sort of well known. It was genius. But it wasn't just a hunch at 10-1. You're like, this is crazy. You were strong on it.
Oh,
You
I
find
thought that on the weekend on the Thai guy, and that went badly wrong. He took
what was
quite
that
a
one?
beating.
What
Yeah,
was
it was
that?
on the Billum Smith
Oh,
Ramirez undercard.
yeah.
It was a Thai guy fighting at minimum weight or light flyweight,
Oh, okay.
and the thing was the Thai guys, they're normally teak tough,
Yeah.
and he was fighting the Mexican champion. Can't remember his name, and I thought, well, this is at worst is a distance fight, and the Mexican guy brutalized him in 6 rounds.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So,
So
on that, then, what's the what? Any sort of more well-known, high-profile ones where you've just got it completely wrong?
Joshua Dubois.
Did you? Nice. Okay. Yeah.
Got that badly wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. And what about so?
For
I'm
the
not
right
saying-
reasons.
I'm not saying this is a related question, but who do you think is the most overrated boxer, either active or historically?
Active Dubois.
Do you? Right. Okay.
Yep. I'm starting to hear this now about how he's an elite heavyweight.
Yeah.
The guys, I've watched Dubois' whole career.
Yeah.
He is no different now. The fighter he was that got beaten by Joe Joyce. It's the same fighter.
Wow.
He goes back in straight lines, doesn't move his head,
Yeah.
fights in patterns. He's got that horrible thing that so many British fighters have, a bouncing.
Yeah.
And he does it in rhythm. So it can be read.
Right.
To me, I think that last I heard they're talking about making Dubois Parker, I think.
Yeah.
I like
Good
Parker
fight.
in that fight. Yeah.
Wow. And
I do-
you'll get good plus money on Parker again.
Yeah, I would
He's
think so.
always the dog. Wow, that's interesting. I agree.
Dubois, didn't you?
The lack of head movement is crazy, but I did see some improvements, but perhaps it was because of the opposition, and there was. But
See, he fought. Who did he? So it's Hergovich, wasn't it? And
which was a terrible fight. I mean, it was just I've never seen someone take so many right hands, and
yep,
Hergovich obviously was not in much shape. Thought it would be straightforward. But Dubois, what I like is he's mid-20s. When did we last have a mid-20s heavyweight that was kind of? He's a natural puncher, and he's a natural athlete. You know, you've got all these manufactured guys who come through. I find, and I quite like his mindset. He just doesn't. He doesn't.
Does he have one?
Well, exactly. That's why it's so refreshing compared to everything else that's so thought out and corporate. He just.
He comes across to me as being on the spectrum.
I would have said so. I think so. But again, I think that's so refreshing about him. Brilliant. I love that take. Okay, so we'll see how that unfolds over the next few years because he's going to be around a bit. So what about who would you have as your number one across any weight division who's active right now?
There's only 3 guys in the conversation, isn't there? That's Inoue, Usyk, and Bud. I'd go Inoue.
You would
right now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if Usyk puts away Fury,
yeah,
it's like 3 weeks' time.
Yeah,
it's hard to argue against him.
Yeah, nice, brilliant. Who's your number one at heavyweight all time?
I'm a bit biased, I guess. Here, try not to allow my opinions to permeate it, but Ali. It'd have to be Ali. Yeah,
solid. Where do you put Iron Mike in the all-time list?
I see. The problem with Tyson was his peak was very short, wasn't it? So we're talking 86 to 89.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah, 86 to 89. He just missed Holmes. The Holmes he fought was a shell of his previous self.
Yeah.
I don't know. So if you think through the greats, what we've got: Dempsey, Johnson, Lewis, Joe Lewis, that is, Ali, Fraser, Foreman. So what's that? 6. Lewis, Holmes, Holyfield, not in the top 10. So probably top 20, I'd say.
Yeah.
I guess he's a bit overrated because the whole aura that he had around him, it was such a short period of dominance. Yeah. And when he came back, he was not the same. I mean, he beat Bruno, and Bruno was top 5 heavyweight at the time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
you have to
say
do quite
top
a lot.
20.
You do have to do quite a lot of digging to find the, sort of that standout. This is his marquee win where he deserves his reputation. You know, 'cause
Well, on paper that'd be Spinks, wouldn't it?
but again, Spinks was injured and barely a
Not fit,
single
yeah,
middleweight.
right.
But have you met any pro boxers in real life?
David Hay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the only one I had a brief conversation with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't meet your heroes.
Yeah. I was a big fan of Hay. I thought Hay could do something at heavyweight, but shame.
I did too. I was a big fan of Hay. I had a real soft spot for him.
Same.
Because he was that speed power.
Exactly.
I think there was a bit of Roy Jones in him. I
Yeah.
think if you had a detailed conversation with Hay, you'd probably say that Jones was an influence on his style.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
It's a shame. And so who do you think is the best British boxer there's ever been across any division?
Oh, Lennox Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy. Yeah.
Big fan of Lennox.
Calzaghe close second.
Yeah, great.
Mm.
What's the most obvious, most predictable fight you've seen in recent years?
Recent years, most predictable one. I think Dubois Herkovic was quite predictable. I bet Dubois on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Herkovic massively. I'll give you another one. Dan Aziz and Joshua Buatsi.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Buatsi. Dan Aziz. I kept seeing Dan Aziz in these top 10 rankings with the Ring, ESPN, BoxRec, and he'd not fought above British level.
Yeah. Well, this is why I should follow you. This is why I always follow you avidly, because both of those I was on the other side of.
Right, well, I was on the other side of the Joshua Dubois. So yeah.
Okay. On the flip side, what's the best upset or the sort of most surprising result you've seen recently?
Most surprising one recently. I hate to mention Dubois Joshua again, but yeah, that would be one. Do you know? That's not recent. I guess it's 10 years ago. Was that one that I talked about earlier? Was Marquez Pacquiao 4?
Yeah.
I was in shock for days after that. Manny looked like he was dead. He hit him so hard with that right hand. Manny was strewn across the edge of the canvas.
Okay, yeah, right.
I think anybody saw that.
Was that before? Was that at the end of Pacquiao? Was that after Pacquiao had beaten Hatton?
Oh, that was quite some time after. Yeah, because it was about 4 or 5 years.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and then Pacquiao came. It's that. I don't know if that's before or after he lost to Bradley, controversially. Yeah, it was around that time.
Right. Okay. Any standout pieces of terrible sportsmanship that stick in your mind when you think of boxing?
Sportsmanship. I didn't pay much attention to that. I like all of the braggadocio, all of the smack talk and whatever. I love all that stuff. I hate it how these British referees try and police it.
Yeah.
They tell these fighters to stop talking smack and sportsmanship. I don't really care for that. I hate all of the got to touch gloves and all that rubbish. These guys are about to beat 10 bells out of each other. You can't tell them they have to like the other bloke.
Interesting. Okay. So what was it Floyd when he touched gloves with one gut? Was it? I can't remember who it was. And then
Victor Ortiz. Victor Ortiz. Yeah.
Yeah.
2011. Yeah.
Okay. So we've sort of touched on this at the start with your analytical approach, but anything differently when you're assessing fights in terms of what you're looking at, if you're judging, if you're scoring yourself?
When I'm watching live, it's different to when I watch it a second time. So when I'm watching it live, I'm not in my head. I have like a running total of punches landed, but apply more weight to obviously power punches. Whereas when I watch it a second time, and with most big fights I do because I log it, I'm looking more about control of the ring. I mean, Pernell Whitaker once won a round without throwing a punch. So it's not just about punches landed, but when you're watching it live, it's probably more so.
Yeah.
You pay more attention to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, Willie Pett as well, I think, was the first to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it probably was. Yeah.
Okay. So.
But the problem with that is because you want to score the fights, because you want to have some sort of idea of where the momentum is, and at the end, if it does go 12 rounds, you want to be able to know if that's the right result. The problem is when you're counting punches, you lose sight of the tactical and technical battle that's going on. So as I'm now 20 years into watching boxing, I can balance that better.
Yeah.
But 10-15 years ago, I struggled with that.
Do you, as a sophisticated bettor, do you bet post fight before the decision? There's that 3-4 minute window where you can still bet when you've got all the information that you'll ever have on the fight, because it's over and you can still bet on it.
So in play, you're saying?
Yeah, but after the fight, before the decision's read.
Yeah, not as a habit, but I have done, but not regularly.
I've always thought
if something's very obvious, then yes. So I have the odds up.
Yeah.
I don't do it all the time.
I've always thought there's something in that, and it's sort of on my to-do list to sort of really say what can you, is there something, because there's no other sport where you've seen the event. There's no more information to learn on it. You've seen it and you can still bet on it.
Yeah.
I like I think you can pass on this if it's the sportsmanship point, but is there anything else in the sport you believe to be true that others would disagree with?
I would say my feeling on British trainers, again, another controversial take. I think there's a complete dearth of world-class trainers here. In fact, I can only see one, and that's Shane McGuigan. I don't see any other world-class trainers in Britain.
Interesting. Is that a recent thing, or has that been for a while?
I think it has been for a while. I think Adam Booth's problem now is he doesn't really have the talent under his wing, but he had. I think there were aspects of his coaching which were world class. I mean, take Don Charles. Have you ever seen an interview with Don Charles?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever seen an interview with him?
Yeah, recently, yeah.
He talks in very, very rudimentary language when it comes to boxing. I've seen no evidence that he knows anything about the nuances of the sport.
Wow.
And I worried for Dubois when I heard he'd gone from Shane McGuigan to Don Charles. I thought Shane McGuigan was absolutely perfect for Dubois because, as you said, he has a natural athleticism. He's extremely fit and he keeps himself in shape. So McGuigan could give him the brain.
Yeah.
And now he goes to, I think Don Charles is probably a glorified conditioner.
Wow. I mean, yeah. And there's plenty of other trainers who get accused of that as well. What about Robert McCracken?
No.
Interesting.
No. Frotz was his protege, basically, wasn't he? And Frotz led with his face.
This is so true. So I had this huge thing about Robert McCracken and Frotch and Anthony Joshua, two very different fighters, but the lack of head movement from both of them. And now Joshua can't suddenly learn head movement now. He's never had it.
No, that is his greatest flaw. But when he went with, first he went with Garcia. I can't remember his Christian name.
Yeah.
He went with Garcia, and then he went with Derek Edwards. Yeah. Derek Edwards, I thought, was an inspired choice.
Right.
Derek Edwards had taught him to use his flaws to his advantage because the opponent could see the flaws, so use that as a bait. Wow. But he'd also taught him a number of ways to use his guard. As you said, Joshua's not going to learn head movement at this point, but he can use his guard.
Yeah.
And there's a number of ways he can use the long guard. He can use a more active high guard. Yeah. And he used neither against Daniel Dubois.
Yeah. Yeah.
That end of that first round, Joshua backed up and his back was on the ropes and his chin was in the air. Yeah. His hands were by his side. And the fight turned on that punch.
Yeah. It's pretty startling, like considering the trajectory that people thought he was going on and the reality of the sort of regression that is unfolding.
I think that you talk about hot takes. When Joshua, so he had the back-to-back losses against Usyk. The vast majority of people had written him off at that point. And I saw, even in his first fight with, was it Jermaine Franklin?
It was, yeah.
Yeah, I think he was with Derek Edwards. I could see things that Edwards had worked on with him.
Right.
Which were elite adjustments to his game. And
Okay.
I thought you take when Joshua was with McCracken, he wasn't just an athlete.
Yeah.
This is a guy who first stepped into the
Yeah.
boxing gym at 18, 19 years of age.
Yeah.
He was just going on athleticism for most of his career. And then he gets a trainer with a little bit of technical nous and nuance. And then he leaves him and he goes to Ben Davison. See, I don't know if you're familiar with Lee Wiley, the guy who works for Ben Davison.
Okay. Yeah.
He used to produce really insightful technical analysis on YouTube, and I
Right.
learned quite a lot through him.
Okay.
But to be able to diagnose what's wrong and to be able to make those technical adjustments, it requires you to turn analysis into coaching.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that Ben Davison and Wiley have quite mastered the coaching element.
I see.
Whereas that's what Derek Edwards was. Derek Edwards is a coach. So yeah, I don't know if Joshua can come back.
How many fights did he have with him?
I think with Edwards he had 3.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Maybe it was 2. Maybe it was 2. But yeah, that was a real shame that he left Edwards.
Well, they've got a huge rebuild now. I think they're waiting for the result of Usyk Fury to see what they do next. But
well, he suffered multiple concussions in that fight, and this is something that here's something you can get data. So when a fighter suffers just a one punch knockout, they often recover much better than they do if they suffer multiple concussions in a fight. And Joshua suffered multiple concussions in that, and that's the second time that happened. Obviously, it happened against Andy Ruiz. Yeah. But now he's 34 years of age.
Yeah.
So the recovery process is going to be much more steep.
So how do you judge, like, whether? So obviously it was a pretty hellacious time for him for 5 rounds. But how do you judge what qualifies as a concussion?
You see some form of cognitive impairment there. Right. Whether that manifests in motor issues or mobility issues, like the straightening of the leg is something that's quite. That takes me actually to something else that I wanted to say when you talked about something that irritates me. Is when Joshua got hit by Dubois by that overhand right. Obviously, that's affected his cognitive ability. And in the second round, when he came out, he wanted to fight because that's his instinct. His instinct is to fight. But if you look at Floyd Mayweather back in 2010 when he fought Shane Mosley, Shane Mosley hit him with a hellacious straight right hand. And Mayweather was hanging on for dear life, holding, keeping the fight close. And he did that for the best part of a round. Mayweather had never been hit like that before. He'd never been hurt like that before. So how did he know what to do? Because he drilled it. Drilled it. So it became instinct. But Joshua's instinct is to fight. And ultimately that got him knocked out cold.
And I think that's what happens with it. As soon as he's in that ring, it's just that whatever he's told before, whatever he thinks he's going to do, instinct takes over. And that's the huge challenge for him, to suppress that instinct. I don't know how he does it. That's brilliant. Okay, so what do you have a favorite boxing quote? We've got some brilliant sound bites over the years. Anyone?
Customato's got some good ones, hasn't he? What do you say? Boxing's 90% character, 10% ability. Right. Definitely. Yeah. Nice. Because character's not just about your performance in the ring, it's performance out of it, obviously. Integrity.
That's a theme that a few people have said how important that is, like that. Yeah.
Yeah. He had another one, didn't he? When you've got 2 guys and when you've got 2 tough guys and one is smarter, he's tougher.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
I guess it's not a great quote, but it's something that always lives with me. It's a great moment in boxing was when Angelo Dundee said to Leonard, "You're blowing it, son." I think was that 10th, 11th round against was it Hagler?
Right.
It's either Hagler or Hearns, but yeah, that's a pretty seminal moment in boxing.
I don't know that one. Brilliant. Okay, shame on me. I should know that. Okay, so any standout boxing movies or books that you would recommend?
Oh, books. What was the one? Oh, the one about the thriller in Manila. Can't remember what it was called. It's a great book.
Ghosts of Manila.
Ghosts of Manila. That's right. Yeah, that's probably the best boxing book I read. Film. Probably. What have you got? Raging Bull.
Yeah.
The Fighter. Or to pick between those two, I would say probably The Fighter. Probably my favorite, simply because De Niro's turned into a bit of a Trump deranged idiot. Yeah, so I go.
Which one's The Fighter?
That's Mickey Ward, isn't it? With Mark Wahlberg and Christian Bell, who steals the film.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Beautiful performance. Yeah.
Do you listen to any boxing podcasts and any that stand out you'd recommend?
Any boxing podcasts I listen to tonight? I used to listen to. I don't anymore, actually. The podcasts I listen to now are mainly current affairs stuff.
Yeah.
But I used to listen to a podcast with Steve Kim.
Okay.
There's some other wimpy bloke on it. I can't remember his name.
Don't know that one.
But that was because Steve Kim's knowledge about like club, right down to club level, US boxing was really good. The only thing I didn't like about that, every episode turned into a love fest about Triple G.
Right.
And he used to get into big arguments with the other bloke about Triple G.
Okay.
They fall out. That's actually another podcast which I listened to for years. Is the Boxing Asylum. Completely irreverent.
Yeah,
I mean, you don't. There's nothing more irreverent than blokes talking about Eddie Hearn's hair plugs.
That's it.
Was farting into a microphone. Yeah.
Stuff. Okay, brilliant. And what is the? This is the final one, actually. There's two more. What's the best entrance you've ever seen, or the most sort of goosebump moment in that the few seconds when the referee's giving final instructions? What's the standout goosebump, hairs on your neck standing up moment you can remember?
Right. Entrance. The first one that comes to mind. That'd be Eubank.
No.
I don't know who was fighting. It was in Germany.
Okay.
And it was extremely hostile atmosphere.
Right.
And Eubank had been digging all week. And he got, as he was wont to do, he got up on the edge of the apron and just stared into the crowd.
Brilliant.
He would do that quite often, but this time it was a lengthy pause. The intensity rose in that moment. Yeah. It was simple entrance. There's no razzmatazz, no pyrotechnics or anything like that. Goosebumps. When you get a really big, historically important fight, because those are what's most important to me, being a fan of the sport and less of individual fighters. You tend to get that dry throat, a little bit shaky.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been like that, any worse than I was when Mayweather fought Pacquiao.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know people talk about that as being such a letdown.
Yeah.
But it was such high level stuff to me. It was absolutely entrancing.
Brilliant. Yeah, absolutely. It's the sport, no matter like if you sort of fall a little bit in and out of love with it during different phases, that it always gets you back. There's always that moment where you're like, right, this has got me. Yeah. And that was one.
I think I felt a little bit like that with Usyk and Fury as well, because that's a heavyweight in heavyweight division. Do you know what? Actually, Fury and Wilder was pretty historically important too. But then when you look at historically important heavyweight fights in the last 20 years, it's probably really only been three. And that was Hay, Klitschko, Fury, Wilder, probably Fury, Usyk.
Yeah.
So when they do come along,
You started by saying the Tyson fights with your dad, 20, 30 years ago, whenever it was. And that, I remember those two. And those Usyk Fury fight, the first one, that is the most similar feeling I've had for decades. The importance of it, the fact it lived up to expectations, the fact that it was so close in the betting, that opinions were so strong and so wide. That was kind of the perfect night of boxing for me for decades, I thought.
Those fights with Tyson 25 years ago, though, I had no idea of the context. I didn't know the opponents he was fighting. I didn't even know Evander Holyfield, the first fight.
Yeah, right.
The second fight, I had a much better understanding.
Yeah,
and obviously Tyson was a fan favorite in my household.
Yeah.
So, and he'd lost the first fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the nerve. That's probably the first time the nerves were there, I would say. And I remember Paul Dempsey, was it, who was the
yeah.
And they made a brilliant hype video for it, which still lasts to this day for the second fight.
Was it the black and white one?
They called it Judgment Day, didn't they? That was it. It was Judgment Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah, the Sound and the Fury was the first one, I think, or the second.
Is that right?
One. And was the promo that black and white one with the sort of classical music playing in slow motion?
No,
I put it on my Twitter a while. It was for the rematch. It was brilliant, and low budget, nothing, no fanfare, but just
Holyfield for that first fight, it was like 13-1, wasn't he? He was a massive underdog.
And
I read about that a few weeks ago because I wasn't into betting. I was 7 years of age, didn't even know it existed. But
so if the transition from the first Holyfield fight to the second Holyfield fight was where you sort of became aware of it, that's quite a shocking event to watch.
yeah. Well, I was into WWE at the time too, so and Tyson was appearing on there within a year.
It also explains if you're perfectly at ease with the bad sportsmanship. If your sort of formative memory is Tyson fighting Holyfield in the rematch, then that obviously explains that as well. Nothing's coming close.
Biting a chunk out of his ear and spitting it on the canvas.
Exactly. That's what the sport is all about. That's what we're looking at. So you got some headphones on there. You're probably a music fan. If you were a boxer, what would your entrance tune be?
I don't know. I might listen to a lot at the moment. Pink Floyd. That would be interesting. Something extremely abstract.
Yeah.
Oasis. Live Forever is pretty good. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Bit of rock. Okay, brilliant. All right, Rich, that has been really fun. I've really enjoyed learning more about what you do.
Yeah, me too. It's excellent. Yeah.
Is there also just spell out your Twitter so people can follow you? Because as I say, you've got a brilliant way of picking these big matches.
At Rich Boxing Bets.
Great.
So it's Boxing Bet Guru at Rich Boxing Bets. Yeah.
We'll put that in the notes as well. And like I say, it's been a brilliant half hour talking to you, Rich, and I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dave. Enjoyed it.
Okay. Talk soon.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.